Welcome into the harvest. This podcast is dedicated to helping you be and make disciples in the everyday places of life. My name is Andrew Stroud, and I am the project lead here at Into the Harvest. And I'm joined today, as I often am, by our editor-in-chief, Abigail Wilson. She's coming to us live. Well, not live, I guess, if you're watching this, but right now she is live from San Antonio, Texas. And of course, I'm recording here in San Diego, California. So Abigail, how are you doing? Are you guys on the home stretch with the school year, or what's the latest in the Wilson household?
Yes, we are. We are officially in the last few weeks of school. Boy, this year flew by. And so we're just like holding on for dear life, just trying to get through it. Yeah. And I just want everyone to know we're recording earlier than we normally do, you and I.
True.
And so our routines are a little bit, you're barely getting your coffee. And have you had a full cup yet? Or
I have had one. We've been doing this. We've been doing these espresso shots, and then I make it into like a little. So it's like 6 ounces. So I have had 6 ounces of coffee. But that's a good point. We're recording earlier than we normally do, and so if something we say here in the next 30 minutes or so is way off base, just know our minds might still be coming up to speed. So that's
I don't know.
warning.
This may be my prime. This is like 9:30 for me. I haven't hit my slump yet.
Well, there we go. If it turns out really well, we're in good shape.
Our new thing.
Yeah, if we say something crazy, then we can blame it on.
Okay. We don't usually talk a lot of small talk, but we do need to know what kind of espresso machine are you using? This is important.
It's a nice espresso machine.
Okay. It's not like
maybe Breville. I think it might be Breville. Might be the name of it.
They're great. Mm-hmm.
But we got this. So we got this for Cindy, my wife, a couple of years ago for Christmas. All the kids and I went in. One of the benefits of having adult children is you can really plus up your gifts, at least from mom, because you know, people actually have jobs and they can go in with you.
Yeah, nice.
So, but truth be told, everyone has benefited from this gift that we gave my wife. So,
as with all mother gifts, I feel like
it's probably true.
Okay, well, that was important. I'm glad everyone could hear our little ad. Coffee is important. Okay,
definitely. Well, Abby, we've been doing interview shows this year. We've been mixing those in kind of every other episode so far. I don't know if we'll continue that exact rhythm, but that's been a lot of fun. But I also enjoy when we can get back to this format where you and I take a listener question, talk about a topic that we find relevant to living and sharing the faith in our own lives and in our communities, and then talk about something that's happening in the world of faith and culture where those two intersect. So we're going to do that today, and we are going to start off with a listener question from Abby Monson. I hope that's how you say your name, Abby, your last name. But she left this as a YouTube comment on episode 121, which you and I recorded together on the blessings and challenges of Christian community. And her question is, how does your time spent with God change when you know you are going through a trial? Are there questions you ask or prayers you have to help learn how to move forward following God's will? Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, Abby, how does your time spent with God change when you're going through a trial? Is there a way that you approach that differently than, I guess, normal times?
Yes. I would say the shortest answer is yes. I think you got to really double down, honestly. These are the times when I tend to really sit there until I walk away with something. Now, that's not always possible. If you're in like a real crisis situation, then you may just be flying by the seat of your pants. In which case, that's when community comes in. I am a big sharer of my life. And so that's when I like SOS all of my ladies. There's like probably, there's like the 3, and then there's the 5, and then there's the 10. And so if things are really bad,
it's just like it escalates. Like,
yeah,
like
the text
Death
groups
Con?
get more and more intense. of like the emojis that I will send, and they know like which ones when it's like probably the big eyes and like the prayer emoji, and then everyone knows to just take a beat.
Hmm.
Um, but if it's
Hmm.
just me and God, I will usually stick with my normal quiet time, but then I will add on some
Hmm.
serious times in the Psalms, usually in like the 30s range.
Hmm.
And then there's some like passages in Isaiah that I will go back to that are like very personal to me, promises that God's given that have helped me when I'm in crisis or when things are just really, really hard.
Hmm.
So I think I tend to be in the word more because there's usually a lot of voices going on in my head during
Yeah.
crisis situations. And so um, I want that voice to be the
So
loudest.
do you have, one of her questions was, do you, she didn't quite say it this way, but do you have a go-to prayer that you find yourself either purposefully or maybe just, I don't know, subconsciously falling back on when you go through those times, Abby?
I think it's First Chronicles, the we don't know what to do, but our eyes are on you. That is
Mm,
pretty much a direct quote
right.
and I think that's pretty much my direct quote to God.
Hmm.
Like, I don't know what to do, but our eyes are on you. So I think that's probably mine.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I may be, well, I do think I am maybe the opposite side of that, where
Oh,
when
goody. Look at the spectrum. Nice.
I just kind of go inward. Like if there's something going
Mm,
on and I'm overwhelmed or stressed, or maybe it's just circumstances that are weighing on me, external things, I tend to just kind of turn inward and try to really, I guess, deal with that. I think that's my first instinct
yes.
is to not go outward, but to really
Hmm.
try to make sense of it,
Hmm.
in my own head and in my own mind, I guess, my own thinking. Um, and so that's not necessarily a good thing. Um, it's really the opposite, I guess, of like Philippians 4, 6, and 7, where it says, don't be anxious about anything. I tend to not that I'm trying to be anxious, but I tend to really make sense of it. I try to figure out, why is this happening? What am I supposed to be
Yeah,
learning?
you're very logical.
Yeah. And so I think over the years, what I am hopefully learning, and I do think that I am making progress here. I'm also a very routine person. And so um, typically, I like this question because typically there is a rhythm and
Mhm.
a way that I tend to approach God, I guess, or my times with God when things are in their normal state. And I would love, I think in the past, I've tried to maintain that. But in more recent years, I think I've maybe given myself permission to just spend more time in prayer,
Mm.
and drawing away, trying to disengage from um, the situation. Maybe if that's like a prayer walk out in nature, um, and just reflecting and praying to God and asking Him to calm my spirit and to help me, to give me strength. Um, I think my tendency is to want to make sense of something in the moment. So why is this happening? Or even, what am
Right.
I
Like kind
supposed
of
to learn?
fix immediately or like be in it immediately.
Yeah, either fix it or just understand it. Like sometimes you
Yeah.
can't fix it, but you want to try to make
Yeah.
sense of, why is God letting this happen?
Right.
And I think I've learned in recent years that I don't always know why it's happening or what
Mhm.
the purpose is. And I guess making peace with that and just asking God to give me the strength, um, to go through, and if there's something to learn whatever it is, but just to be faithful in whatever's happening, be it a trial or just some sort of setback,
Mhm.
and realizing that's enough. It's enough to ask
Yeah.
God to be with me and to help me to be faithful, whatever that looks like. I don't have to even know necessarily. Just, be with me, help me to be faithful in the midst of this particular season or chapter that I'm going through. So it's
Mm.
not so much, I guess, a specific prayer, but I guess it is maybe a different approach than I would typically
Mhm.
have.
Yeah. Setting aside that extra time. Yeah. I think that's um, a great routine to get into, especially, well, whatever personality you are. I mean, I think I benefit from that too. Um, uh, and maybe if there's, depending on your personality, whether you're a immediate despair, like in a whole person, or if you're like in there trying to figure it out,
Right.
pragmatic person, whatever you are, making space for really specific prayer and hopefully time in the Word will be helpful.
Yeah, I think reminding yourself of certain promises, a great one that many people find comfort from is Romans 8:28, that God is going to cause all things to work together for good. There's another one out of Psalms that talks about how the Lord has recorded our tears in his bottle. And it goes on to say, this I know that God is for me.
Yeah.
And, sometimes just reminding yourself that, hey, whatever's going on, it isn't that God isn't aware or isn't concerned, or that he's distant, even though he may feel that way. We can have confidence that he's there with us and that he cares about us, even if we don't always feel that way in the moment. So any other thoughts from you on this one, Abby?
No, I hope that was helpful for Abby. Hope she's not going through a hard time.
Yeah.
Reach out, Abby. Let us know how you're doing.
Well, we do appreciate everyone who sends us questions that we can cover on the show. Our goal is always to be using this time and using this particular podcast to talk about things that are relevant to living an ancient faith in modern times. So, Abby, thank you for leaving that comment on the YouTube channel. And if you guys want to have us address a question that is relevant in your own life and faith, you can send that to us on the YouTube channel in a comment. We do read those and we try to pick those up and answer them on the show, or you can email us info@intotheharvest.org, and we'll be sure to address that on a future show. All right. Well, Abigail, over the last, really since the first of the year, which you said this earlier, I can't believe we're in May right now, which is bizarre. But there's kind of been a theme, not that we set out to do this, but there's really been, if there's been a theme that has sort of tracked with the different shows that we've done, I think it's following Jesus over a lifetime. So, or following Jesus for the long haul. And I don't know what that says about where we're at in life, you and I.
We won't read into it.
But we're going to sort of continue on that theme with today's show, because we want to talk about how growth and discipleship change as you get older, or at least from our perspective, how growth and discipleship have shifted over the years. And we'll probably come at this from a couple of different angles. But let me just start with that. Abby, why do you think that this topic is relevant for us to discuss?
Yeah, I won't read into it like specifically for us, but I do think, maybe even just our audience, the people that we are trying to reach, we are wanting longevity of discipleship and ministry and being intentional in our lives with Jesus. And so inevitably, that's the great news, is that if the Lord leaves us here and he tarries and doesn't return, then we're going to be doing this into different decades of our own lives. And I think as I progress through different seasons of life, I definitely see the shift and the changes that happen. As someone who hates changes, I don't enjoy it. And then I get all ruffled and I need like to be talked down a little and be like, why can't it be like it was, in my 30s or whatever. So, so I think it's just important for us to talk through, at least for me. I need to talk through just these pros and cons almost of growing older, and not necessarily like in a cliche way, but these seasons look different and that's okay. But we also want to be really healthy in our faith and not just be like, oh, it's just a season. I'm sure I'll get back to Jesus later. I want to stay in it, stay in the game.
Yeah, I like that. I like that take. Many people have heard the saying that the Christian race is a marathon, not a sprint. Paul talks about running the race with endurance and finishing the race that we're on. So I think that's part of it. None of us are getting younger. That's just the nature of life, is that it does progress. And like you said, it does shift and change. And the goal is to follow Jesus the whole way from start to finish. And when Paul made that comment that he had finished the race, he had kept the faith, it was in the context of he knew that his death was imminent. And so likewise for us, as long as we're on this earth in these physical bodies in this earthly life, the race is still going. And so we want to keep running it, and we want to be strong. We want to finish strong. There's a classic audio that's part of our Disciple Makers Leatherman series called Many Aspire, Few Attain. And I think it's so dated because he references a few things in the course of that talk. It's like the Vietnam War or something.
It's still relevant.
Yes,
it's dated, but relevant.
Right.
I don't know how
Yeah, just update the current events of that time.
We could just dub over.
Yeah, the principles are timeless, but and the main principle or the main theme of that message is lots of people start out well. In fact, you can make the case that I guess everyone kind of starts off well, coming to faith and wanting to live a new life in Christ. I think anyone who has a genuine faith, that's the case. The goal is to finish well, and not very many people finish well. So yeah, we want to talk about our own journey. Abby, I won't ask you your age because you're a lady, but
I don't know my age. Hold on.
I think
I always have to ask Brett. Oh, I'm going to be 39 this year. That's right.
Okay, there we go.
In November. So I'm currently 38. I'm not at all like, I'm not one of those like coy people about my age. I just literally can't do the math at this point. I was an English major. What do you want from me, people?
Yeah, and I'm 10 years ahead of you. So I'm going to be 49 later this month. So
that's right.
So we've got a ways to go, but we've got some miles behind us as well. So we're going to talk about just our own experiences, but also observations that we've made over the years of how growth and discipleship has changed. So do you have a healthy example of discipleship and accountability from your own life or from someone that you've observed do this well? What are some of the things that stand out to you as being important?
I think what I've observed is that as you progress kind of out of your, maybe those late 20s, maybe you're married, maybe you're not, maybe you have like one or two little baby children. And then that's a definite season that you kind of start to be like, I'm old and wise, and I've really got some things figured out. And you look down on the younger 20s, I think. And that's probably a really key time to have people a little bit further down the road, investing in you a lot, because I think your life is just moving at a quicker pace than it has previously, and it feels new. And I think having someone speaking into our lives on a very regular basis was really important at that point. And I think that was probably similar for you as well. That's kind of when we're like, okay, this is what we're going to do for a lifetime. We are locked in and we're going to like go hard for Jesus. But also maybe we don't know how to do that fully.
Yeah.
Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, definitely. And we talked a few episodes back on, the top traits to look for in a spiritual mentor, but yes, maintaining connection with the older generation who I think ideally is 20 years ahead of you.
Yeah.
That you can't always get that math to work out, but I think it's still good to put it out there as a reference point that if you can find someone who's, 15 to 30 years ahead of you in life and is actively following Jesus, who's doing it well. If you can have that kind of person in your life that you're learning from, and that that your life is visible to, so that they can speak into it, yeah, I think
Mhm.
that's an ideal situation that many of us either don't have, or maybe we don't pursue those types of relationships, but that's a big one for
Mhm.
sure.
So I think at that point, Brett and I made conscious decisions to
Mm.
actually
Yeah.
move to be near people that fit that description for us. God was just really kind and made that,
Mm.
allowed that to happen. I'm not saying that's possible for everybody, but it was a really high priority for us in that season of life. Um, but then even like a little prior when we were really learning from you and Cindy, you were only 10 years ahead of us, but it
Right.
felt like a lifetime because you had like so many children and we didn't have any. So it was,
Yeah. Well, that's a
so
good point.
it feels like a lot
I
at
think
that
if
point.
you're, yeah, if you're in your early 20s and someone's in their early 30s, that's a pretty
You're
big gap.
ancient. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's probably like equivalent to if you're in your 30s and someone's in their early 50s.
yeah.
Um,
So maybe it's a sliding scale.
yes.
But then I think like if that's you, then it may be just really, really key and important to pursue those people
Mhm.
and make it work where it will feel like a major sacrifice on your part because
Right.
your life is, you know, moving
Yeah.
fast and quick. Maybe you're getting into a career, maybe, you know, you do starting to have children, maybe you're
Right.
still looking for a spouse. So those things can feel like that's more important. But I think
Hmm.
finding someone to disciple you is actually, I'm here to tell you, it will be worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, are you gonna
Well,
add something?
well, I love that you and Brett physically put yourselves in a place where that would be available to you. And you're
Mhm.
right, that may not be an option for
Yeah.
everyone, but it's probably an option for more people than they might give themselves credit for. You know, that basically we prioritize what we value. And so if it's not a priority, or if it's not something that we're willing to make those big decisions to make happen, then it just may not be as high a value for us as we would want to think.
Mhm.
Which is always one of the challenges in life, is to be honest with yourself
Yeah.
in terms of how
Like, oh, I'm
committed you
not
are to
that cool.
something. Yeah, it's kind of like, well, this would be great if it just kind of worked out. But
Yeah.
that's different. And I think
Mhm.
with Jesus, it's cool because even the first disciples, that was part of what they had to do, was physically put themselves in a position where they could learn from Jesus. And I do think that that's still true for a lot of us, that needs to be something that's on the table, is, will I move? And maybe it's just moving across town. So you may not have to
Yeah.
move to a different state, but trying to put yourself, just thinking about your physical week in, week
Mhm.
out activities. And are you physically putting yourself around those older believers who could be mentors and that you could learn from?
Yeah.
So I want to maybe talk about a few other um, ways that
Yeah.
discipleship and growth has changed for us. But since we're talking
Okay.
about mentors, you and I talked about this a little bit before we jumped
Mhm.
on. And the idea that it seems that there are fewer and fewer as you get older. And I think
Mhm.
this is just, it makes sense mathematically. There are fewer and fewer
That's
older
sad.
people, couples to learn from. And
Mhm.
so I guess we didn't really talk it through extensively. The
Yeah.
idea was, it seems like that's the case, that there are fewer and fewer. And I think it is the case for different reasons.
Yeah.
Um, but you've experienced that.
Yeah, sure. I think, well, what I was going to say is I think things have shifted to where we see our mentors less. And
Mhm.
that's for on both sides for different reasons. Health and busyness on their side, crazy busyness and ministry on our side. But I feel like we still make an effort to have those times with them. And I know that we're not the only people they're investing in. And so there's a lot of people that they are investing in online, so distance
Mm.
wise. And I know you invest in a lot of people over, distance as
Right.
well. And so I almost think that as like the 30s and 40s, it almost tends to work well and fine to have a little less contact, like week to week
Right.
contact or day to day, maybe,
Hmm.
and more week to week. And
Yeah.
when I was thinking about this and like and trying to be really honest, like you said, about are we being healthy right now? Like that I see my mentors, like our major people pouring into our lives that we really want to learn from. Maybe on every month we see them, and we are in a Bible study with them every other week. And then I have a couple of other older ladies that I meet with, so probably like twice a month. But I think what has happened is that then my day-to-day and that sort of accountability and help is coming from peers.
Right.
And so having running mates in this season has been really key in my health and my growth,
right.
In a way that was maybe different when I was younger.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think that was actually going to be one of my takeaways, is that as I've gotten older, it's been more important to maintain strong connections with those who are closer to me in age, season of life, but who share my values and who are also trying to pursue Christ and live this faith in a real and meaningful way. And I do think that the daily, weekly interactions with those folks represent the real substance of what's keeping me encouraged, calling me back onto the path when I get distracted or stray. I do still have a connection with Cecil Bean. He's the older believer who discipled me when I was in my 20s. In fact, he's coming in this weekend. He's going to be visiting with us for several days.
Cool.
So we don't get to do that. We do that maybe once a year where we see each other in person.
Yeah.
And neither one of us are great. Like we're never going to have, I don't think, it hasn't happened so far where we just spend 30 minutes chatting on the phone. And so the distance thing with him is
just
definitely
knowing
not
your personalities. What in the world would you talk about?
It's pretty funny. But when we're in person, we can go for hours. So, so I think, but even just knowing that he's there, and I think that this is something to bear in mind for us as well as we get older, is just being visible, me being able to see that, hey, he's still following the Lord. He's still seeking Jesus. And I think in the scriptures, you see that maybe from the life of the Apostle Paul, that he would come into town and he would visit. He might even spend several months in a place. Yeah. But when that wasn't happening, people would hear of his doings, either because he would send representatives on his behalf or he would write a letter. And so I think just having those people that though, like I think there's something different between like a celebrity that, like a John Piper or a John MacArthur or whoever your person is that you look to from a distance. Not I'm not using celebrity in a derogatory way, but someone that you don't personally know.
Yeah, you've never actually sat in their living room.
Right. So I think
sit in their living room.
I'm not talking about that, but if you have someone that you do know, that you have a real relationship with, and to see them continuing to follow Christ, I think that that's a huge part of staying encouraged and sort of setting the tone for your own discipleship. So maybe we got time for maybe one more. So I'm going to throw one out here that's a little bit different than mentors.
Okay.
I think one for me, and you touched on it just briefly earlier, it's the idea that you should constantly be learning and growing. So not allowing yourself to slip into a mindset where I've read the Bible 5 times and I've studied the book of John. I don't need to study that anymore. I don't need to put as much effort into seeking to learn and to grow. I love how Paul in Romans 11 talks about the depth of the wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable are his judgments and unfathomable his ways. And the scripture over and over, this is a theme that the ways of God have to be sought out, that in Jesus are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge, but they're hidden. They have to be dug out. So I think another thing that has definitely encouraged me, when I'm doing it well, then I'm doing well. And when I'm not, then those are usually when I'm distracted or I'm not growing in my faith as I would want to. It has to do with continuing to learn and seek out the truth of God for my own life. And part of that, I would say a subset of that is trying to communicate it. So it's not just going off into my study by myself and reading the Bible for hours, but it's spending time learning from Jesus and trying to actively share what I'm learning with others. And those two things together have been a real catalyst for me to keep the Christian life fresh and relevant, exciting. Whereas I think if I wasn't doing that, it would get old. The Christian life would get really stale, and I don't think I'd be growing or living a life of discipleship.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, we've talked about this on several different kind of subjects, but it all lines up of, you just don't want that stale water. Like, it needs to run on through, like it needs to hit that next point down the line. And so, I think that if you're feeling stale or tired or like, really, I've got to keep doing this for another however many years, then that may be the diagnosis. And I think that's really good. And I love that you talk about that a lot, of needing to pass on what God is teaching you, and that's really key for you. I mean, I think you are a teacher by nature. And so I think there's some people who just tend to have that gifting and that leaning. However, I think this covers all humans. Like, all of you cannot discount this because you're like, oh, Andrew, because I mean, I really think that there's something to our own understanding and learning when we're in communication with others. Like, as the body of Christ, we are getting to experience other people's viewpoints on that same scripture, or, God taught me this, and then that person responds. And so I think there's a lot to be said for, this is not on an island situation for any of us. Oh man, there was something you said from that I really wanted to, but we're probably running out of time, so it's okay.
Well, what
I'll
we
think
should
of
do
it later.
And we'll make a note and we'll revisit this.
Yeah.
I actually think this would be a great subject to dive into a little bit deeper, is what do you do when the Christian life gets stale or feels like it's, hey, I've seen this, I've been down, it's deja vu, I've been down this street several times. How do you keep it fresh? So maybe that's something we could explore further in the future.
You know what? Just short answer, you should have a house church, because I could just really use some stale, I've been here before stuff. It's not happening.
Well, if you're listening, let us know if that would be a topic that would be helpful. And if so, maybe we'll cover that on a future episode.
I'll give you a better answer, I promise.
Yeah, we'll give you more. That's definitely more.
Yeah, okay.
Well, Abby, we're also going to wrap up the show today with a faith and culture segment. And there's something that's happening coming out of the pandemic called the Great Resignation. And this is happening across the board. And the short synopsis of it is that people who spent weeks, months, sort of disengaged from their normal routines, in some cases not going into the office, working from home, as the pandemic has begun to alleviate and people are having the opportunity to return back to normal life. Many of them are opting out. So this happens quite a bit in I think especially in probably more white collar type vocations, where people have the option to go back into the office, but basically decide like, no, actually, I don't want to either go back into the office, or perhaps I don't even want to continue in this line of work. That the pandemic was almost this great introspective moment for so many people to assess, is life going the way I want it to go? And if not, make a shift. But we were going to talk about how that has shown up in the church specifically, and with traditional pastors in particular. And so I had sent you a Twitter thread where one of these pastors had walked through why he was resigning as a pastor, and the things that led up to that, and thought that we could talk a little bit about the Great Resignation, and in particular, our thoughts about how that is and how that will affect church and faith in the United States in particular.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for sending me that Twitter thread in the late evening. It's not like the best and most
Uh,
uplifting thing to read before bed, but that's fine. It's part of my
oh
job.
man.
Um, but yes, friends, it's we'll like link to that. I think we can do
Yeah.
that, Andrew.
Yep.
You can just take a look at that and take from it what you will. My real takeaway there, Andrew, we've talked about this before because it is fascinating, I think, to both of us, just
Right.
what the pandemic, the last few years has done to the church, what has
Yeah.
speeded up maybe
Right.
as kind of something we've seen. That this is specific to the leaders in the church, like those that supposedly are the strongest in their faith.
Yeah.
And kind of I'm going to just tell you what, you're the one who's been like in there on Twitter and like knows what's going on. So I will just tell you from the tiny little snippets that you gave me what my assessment was, and then you can tell me how far off I am. But I think like the biggest thing was how much pressure these pastors felt, how much just intense responsibility, which I mean, they've always had, but it maybe just has felt so much more. And so my diagnosis there was, man, the body of Christ, like the church, is really failing. And these leaders cannot just hold it up.
Right.
That's not what they were supposed to do. And it's definitely not what one person or two people or even a staff of people are supposed to do. That is not healthy church by any stretch. So to me, it was a real shining light on the health of our church overall, not necessarily these pastors.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely link to the thread, and I think Christianity Today had a recent article. Maybe we can link to that as well. But it's something like 40+% of pastors have seriously considered quitting. Yeah, as of March of this year, I believe, was when Barna did their research. And I don't remember offhand like how much of a bump that is from where it might have been on
that
a
would
normal
be interesting.
on a normal
Because I mean,
basis.
I would feel like everyone wants to quit.
But yeah, if you think about the pressures of a traditional pastor over the past 2 years, obviously there's the whole issue of, can you even gather in person? And then if you're part of a church that has not been very tech savvy, trying to figure that out and trying to go remote. And then you got members who don't want to do remote, who feel like it's actually the wrong thing, that you're rendering to Caesar things that belong to God. And you're getting pressure from different sides of your congregation to take a certain course of action or to take a political stand. Yeah, there've been a lot of things. So I guess that's one of my takeaways from this thread is how important it is to know the mission. And I think the model matters. So I think the traditional model of church and what we expect of a pastor in the traditional, what some have called the legacy model, which we're all familiar with, that tends to be built around a Sunday service and a single individual who is responsible for guiding the flock and delivering the word of God week in and week out. I think that model works well in the age of Christendom, where there's support for Christian themes and Christian values. Yeah. I just don't think it's a sustainable model. And I think that's one of the reasons why you don't really see it outside of nations where the church has some sort of support from the government or some sort of support from society. And so we talked about this on a recent episode, actually the first episode this year, the State of the Church in 2022. Yeah. And, I made the point that I think that 2020 was the year that Christendom flatlined in the United States.
Yes,
and
you were very dramatic.
It hadn't been doing very well in decades. So I think what I would be interested in someone doing research into how many of these pastors are leaving the call to pastor, to shepherd God's people, versus how many are leaving the career of, being a vocational minister. Because if you're leaving the model, but because it's just not sustainable, or it's not sustainable for your mental health, I think that's one thing. If you're walking away from this call, then that's tough. Something really went wrong. Either the call wasn't clear to begin with, and perhaps you were doing a job because it was a job that was appealing,
which is weird.
Or you just got, you're broken spiritually in a way that's really sad, and you've maybe lost sight or lost the capacity to engage in that call.
Well, what you sent me, it was the survey, and it was like the exit survey of like why people left.
Right.
And I should probably pull it up, but I was a little encouraged because I think losing faith was pretty low. Yeah. And even like doing a different career was pretty low, which you could even say to do a different career is not even a bad thing. I mean, we know that there's a lot of reasons to go bivocational or just feeling called into something, and still have that call to do the work of a pastor. So I actually did not feel like it was that dire for these people. I agree. I felt like instead it was a real pointing the arrow at this whole way we're doing it, and it's not working.
So I read another tweet, Abby, and maybe we can wrap up with this because we're coming up on our time.
Okay.
But I think it's relevant to what you just said, the point you're making there, that it's perhaps the model and the way we're going about life, and particularly the Christian life, that perhaps needs to be changed. So maybe this is a good thing. But this quote says, people did not realize how tired they were when the pandemic hit. Instead of engaging in rhythms of rest, they disengaged. And I thought that was pretty spot on for a lot of us. And so the issue is to not disengage. I think that would be the wrong prescription to take as a result of what we've all gone through over the past 2 years, but to recalibrate and to go about the Christian life and Christian community in a way that's more in line with scriptures, and is more sustainable for what we're talking about on this show, which is following Jesus for the long haul. I think if that's where we come out of things in future years, then that won't be a bad shift.
Yeah. And maybe that's something too we need to talk about. I don't have something I'm currently like grappling with is the idea of rest and taking rest, especially when you are making this a lifestyle and a lifelong thing that you're doing, that it's not sustainable for forever and ever, that we have to have these rhythms and seasons of rest or restoration, but not just checking out, which I think people are pushed to because they get to that limit. So maybe we're just coming up with topics right and left, everybody. I hope you're all writing them down. We'll have to go back and make notes.
Well, maybe we can do that one on a future. That would be a great one too. But we are out of time today. So Abby, thanks for being flexible with your schedule, making this happen a little earlier than we normally do.
No problem. It was fun. All right, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.